Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Camille Gay, and I will be your host for this webinar. I represent VVA, the training provider, and I am joined here today by Mrs. Marsha Tarl. The topic of our webinar today is soft skills and their added value in recruitment. It will be divided in 3 short sessions, each followed by a Q&A session. The first session is on the topic, what are soft skills? The second one will focus on soft skills and job seekers, and the last one on soft skills and employers. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them at any point in the live chat, and we will answer them during the event. Please also feel free to flag any technical issues in this chat. We would like to inform you that there might be a small delay between the live chat and the video, so it might be that when you pose the questions, we have a small delay in answering them. We thank you all for tuning in, and I will now give the floor to Mrs. Marsha Tarl for a brief introduction and for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Camille. So my name is Marsha Tarl. I'm based in Brussels, and I have been working as a communication and soft skills trainer and coach for about 10 years now. I've also had a career in communications and also teaching English, so soft skills are something that I'm very passionate about. And without further ado, I'm going to start today's webinar. We're going to be talking about soft skills, and I've divided the topic into 3 parts. We have divided it together so that we can also have your questions. The first one will be really a definition of what they are and some of the issues that arise from talking about soft skills. Then we're going to look at the issue of soft skills and employers and organizations, how they define them and what they do with them. And then lastly, we will look into job seekers and how they can approach soft skills. So first of all, what are soft skills? We have 3 considerations here in the content of this topic. One is there's some definition and issues that arise actually from the concept itself. Then we need to look a little bit more into organizations and how they define the soft skills. And I would also like to lead you through what are the key soft skills, what some consider today, and whether they can be learned or taught. So we will look into this. The definition that I found on soft skills, but of course there's many others you can find, is that there are personal habits and traits that really shape how you work on your own and with others. And soft skills are very much related to a person's character or personality. And this is why I underlined the word personal. It's also important to see that when we talk about soft skills, we really talk about habits and traits and attributes. So these are kind of synonyms, which means that it's not always clear to people whether they're really skills in the sense of a skill that you learn. But some people would say that soft skills are something that are really, that come with the person, almost as if something that we have as part of our personality. But no matter what they are, they're very, very important for success on a job, on any job really. And we're going to look at later the different kind of types of jobs and different types of soft skills that we can have. Some of the synonyms that we use for soft skills are people skills, interpersonal skills, or competencies. And some people would say that they're not exact synonyms, but we could say that a subpart of soft skills are people skills or interpersonal skills, and some organizations even call them competencies. Now, you probably heard of soft skills because they were defined as something that is opposite of hard skills. So we all know that certain skills are quite easy to teach and they're easy to quantify, like learning a language. These can be any skill actually that you can have a degree or certificate on that skill, could be called a hard skill. One example here they put is typing speed. So maybe you remember before for any kind of administrative desk job, this was a very important skill to have. Nowadays, not many people ask about it, but this is a good example of a hard skill. Machine operation, different things could go there. Computer programming, there's so many different skills. It's so difficult to follow, really. All of these are hard skills. Also from your own life, a skill like driving is a very easy, hard skill to define. And then soft skills, when you look on the right, you will see that they're much harder to define, much more difficult to put a degree or certificate on. We have things like communication, flexibility, leadership, teamwork, time management. So these are kind of basic ones that come to mind when we think of people skills or interpersonal skills. So this is a kind of opposition that not everyone is happy with, because some people say that if we define soft skills as opposed to hard skills, that what we're doing is we're putting soft skills in a place where they don't seem very important. I would actually disagree. I think that it doesn't really matter how we call them. I think what really matters is that we do talk about them and that we make sure that both employers and job seekers are really well aware of the kind of soft skills that they're looking for in an organization. Now, what is a common problem with soft skills? Well, there's a couple of them. One is that we do not have a standardized list of soft skills. So you will not find like a list. You will actually find many lists. And you will see that every year, especially in different media, they say these are the soft skills that are popular in 2021, 22. And they kind of change a little bit. But there is no list that you can say this is the list. So they're very elusive and they're a very diverse mix of skills, attitudes, and behaviors. Another problem is that we cannot easily teach them or learn them, as I have mentioned before. And some would even say, are they skills? Because they're just so much part of who we are, right? So we can say that someone is a flexible person, someone is like a natural born leader, someone is very communicative. So some people would say that's not a skill. This is just the way that they are. Another problem is that they're often underrated. So we also already mentioned that, hard versus soft skills. Some people say they're not very important. And actually in recruitment processes, this does happen a lot, that the recruiters and the employers focus a lot on hard skills because, let's admit it, they're often very hard to find, different hard skills that not many people have. But then they forget this aspect of soft skills. But in order for any organization to thrive, you of course really need to have a good mix of those in the same person. And finally, as we already said, they're very difficult to certify, very difficult to prove. There are some courses, and even there's this concept that you may have heard of micro-credentials. So we could maybe certify certain skills. On LinkedIn, there's certain courses that you will find. But it's not really clear how someone can, have like a couple of hours and become a couple of hours of a course and become a leader, or a couple of hours of a course and become a great communicator. It's really something that needs to be worked on for a longer period of time, and that also comes through experience. We will look, however, into some ways of proving them. So, for example, references. And one thing that is important is that when you read someone's references, or when you ask for references when you're looking for a job, to really put that highlight on the soft skills so that it's really clear from a reference the soft skills that you have. Now, there is a bias with soft skills. And the fact is that people find it, we all find it very hard to change, and we resist learning new things. So it's not that easy for us to improve our soft skills. It's super important, but it's not really easy because of this bias. We really resist learning new things. Also, people judge other people's soft skills quite harshly, while thinking that our own soft skills are great. So we're not always realistic in terms of how we see other people's soft skills and our own. Also, there's a lot of defensiveness that comes with improving soft skills. You think, well, why should I improve this? This is not something that I need to work on. I think I'm very good at this. However, I think anyone can really improve their soft skills, whatever stage they are in. And I do think that when we overcome the first defensiveness, that we can become really better at a soft skill that we choose. Also, soft skills are very related to our own ideologies or ideas and principles. So if we have a very specific idea of how the world needs to be, very specific principles. For example, if for us it's very important a work ethic and hardworking and responsibility, then the soft skills that we're going to value are going to be very much in that. So we have to be careful with that because we need to understand that people have, of course, different principles, ideologies, and cultures, and that soft skills may vary as well. And soft skills are actually very close to a specific culture, of course, geographically as well. But now, when we talk about culture, we will talk about organizational culture. And it is really clear, and I'm sure that any of you who have worked in different organizations have seen that what works in one company may not exactly work for another. So soft skills will change also from one company to another. I have put here an example of an organization and their classification of soft skills. Of course, really big organizations like the European institutions, they have, or even any private organization that is really big, they have kind of like, say, the luxury of creating their own system of soft skills. They do not officially call them soft skills, they call them competencies, and we could say that some of them are not absolutely soft skills, they're a little bit of, some of them could even be a little bit of hard skills. But I think this is quite an interesting classification, especially because it's new. So before there were 7 competencies, they were a little bit different. One of them was leadership. And so for those of you who have ever been preparing other people or yourself for one of these tests from the European institutions, you know that there was a different list. This one is really the updated one because that is going to come into effect in next year. So you can have a look here, the skills that they have kind of updated because they felt that their list of competencies was being a bit outdated. So they had this list of 8, which is critical thinking, the first one, analyzing, creative problem solving. Then they have decision making, getting results. Then they put here information management. So this is where I say the hard skills are a little bit there as well. Digital and data literacy. So this means this organization really wants people who have those skills. And they actually believe them to be a competency that is just going across all areas and that every person should have them. Self-management, I think that one sounds quite interesting. We're going to look a little bit later into what they are, some of them. Working together, this one is actually the same as the one that was there before. Learning as a skill is also one that was there before, so the capacity to always be learning. Communication, this is really the queen of all soft skills, it's always there. And we have a new one there, which is entrepreneurship. So this is really the capacity to be innovative inside the organization. So I just wanted to go into detail into 1 or 2 of these so that you see how a big organization such as the EU institution is really defining a competency. Self-management, which is a new one, it says that this is how someone organizes their own work, sets goals, manages times effectively, demonstrates, so shows self-motivation, a sense of responsibility, shows resilience. So this is interesting because resilience in the old classification was a competency, a soft skill in itself. So now they have put it here into self-management, and how the person has the positive attitude, how they really remain effective, efficient under a kind of changing, fluctuating workload, and how they are adaptable. So this is really an interesting skill that they put in here. When you read such a definition of a competency, it says really a lot about the organization and what they value. Another one is working together. So here what the EU institutions want, what they really value as a soft skill, as a competency, is that a person can collaborate across structures, because remember, they have a lot of DGs, a lot of different departments, right? So and actually a lot of different institutions as well. So they need people who can collaborate across all these different structures. Maybe this skill is not going to be important in a smaller organization, but for them this is really important. Also the sharing rather than of hoarding knowledge, right? So sharing with others, not just collecting knowledge for themselves. Being service-minded, this is also very interesting, this word. And then dealing constructively with conflict. So they want people who maybe don't avoid conflict, but know how to deal with it. And very importantly, can work in a multicultural, multilingual environment that really supports diversity and are respectful and inclusive of others. And this is one that I would really like to highlight, because this is a big one in the last couple of years, but especially for 2023, they are saying that because of the world that we are living in, very global, we are also working many people remotely, that this kind of skill of working in a multicultural environment is becoming ever more important. Now, the queen of soft skills, as I said, is definitely communication. And I think this is also why in my career I have focused a lot on training communication skills and coaching people in communication. So communication really covers a wide range of abilities, kind of demanding abilities, let's say, but they're very essential for many occupations. And I wanted to here include occupations that also EURES is dealing with when we talk about job mobility. You have nurses, you have teachers. There's going to be, of course, a lot of need for sales persons, for people who take care of the elderly. This is definitely in demand. So all of these professions are needing also communication. And any skill, any soft skill, can be then always divided into other sub-skills. And here they talk about building rapport, which is really how you build a relationship with someone, listening, asking the right questions, influencing, negotiating, networking, persuading, coaching others, mentoring, mediating between people who may have conflicts. So these are, when you look at them, they definitely don't seem soft, right? They're very important skills because they're really the basis of who we are. If we do not have these skills, we cannot work together, we cannot build things together, we cannot develop, and people cannot have a good career if they're not building on these skills. So very important skills in communication, and this is why I was always passionate about this skill, because it can really be declined into many sub-skills that can be taught. And I put here that the prince of soft skills is actually listening. And I put the highlight on that skill only so that I can show you that, of course, soft skills can be taught, but some skills, let's say, easier than others, especially communication, because we have a lot of literature already, a lot of trainings have been done on soft skills. So if there's one day someone is asking for what soft skills they can work on, I would definitely recommend to start with communication. And listening is a skill that can be taught. Each soft skill, as I said, can be divided into many sub-skills, and listening is very important because in many professions it's really a lot about active listening, like, for example, customer service, starting a conversation, resilience, like being calm under stress, etc. This is a book that I would recommend on people skills and soft skills. It focuses very much on communication skills, but it is really an excellent book, an excellent read, and also if you ever want to create a course or recommend someone to read more about soft skills. The author, Robert Bolton, he divides them into 5 listening skills as the first one: assertion skills, so be able to stand up for yourself, conflict resolution skills, collaborative problem resolving, and then I like this last one, which is skills selection. This is really important because we can know a lot about skills, we can have a lot of soft skills, but if we do not know which soft skill to use in what moment, that can also be an issue, because we can kind of have some setbacks there. So just an example of the skill of listening. I actually did some courses, I gave some trainings on listening, and they can be just an example that they can actually be divided. Listening can be divided into sub-skills, which are attending skills. So what we do in these courses is we teach people how they can have a posture that shows that they're involved in the conversation, the kind of body motions that show that you're listening, the kind of eye contact that you have, how important it is to be in a non-distracting environment when you want to show and you want to listen to someone. So these are attending skills. Then we have following skills. So what we show the participant is how to have like door openers, which means how you can kind of create little moments where you can ask a person whether they're ready to talk about something, encourage them with certain words, not ask too many questions. Some of us ask a lot of questions, but actually listening is all about letting the other person speak, having some silences, and also then reflective skills. What we teach in these courses is how you can paraphrase what the person is telling you, how you can reflect their feelings back to them, how you can reflect the meaning of what they say back to them, and how you can summarize what they have said. And I'm sure that you have sometimes been in a situation where you have really felt that you were listened to. And when someone has the skill of listening, this is really a good skill to have. And I would say that really important one in terms of soft skills. So I would encourage you to start with that one. Okay, so I think we've done actually the first part. So I'm going to give over to Camille, who maybe has some questions from the audience.
Yes, well, first of all, I hope that the sound issue is fixed and that you can all hear us correctly. If not, please let us know in the chat. If you have any questions regarding this first part of the presentation, please also write them in the chat. Because there is a slight delay, I might indeed start by asking one question myself. You talked at the end about how soft skills can be taught. What could be done to develop and obtain soft skills more broadly?
Okay, so broadly is a very broad question. So what we would like to say is what can be done in terms of teaching soft skills at certain levels. I believe that the education system, we need to do something about it there, because it is often the case, and many of us have had this, if you have children, that you send them to school quite early. Actually, in some systems, like in Belgium, it is at 4 years old. 2.5 actually already, 3, 4 years old. Okay, it's almost like kindergarten, so the children are playing there, they're not sitting and learning. However, I remember very well when my son had some issues with collaboration, playing with others, and the teacher told me, we are not here to teach them how to play, communicate with others. We are here to teach them, let's say the curriculum or whatever. And that really struck me, because I thought, wow, if there's one moment in life that a person should be taught these skills, it's definitely at an early age. And I think we talk a lot about equality in education. And I would say that the best way to achieve equality is to give the chance to especially children who come from environments where maybe there is not the best communication, where they're not seeing these soft skills modeled of, negotiation, collaboration, working together, listening, and to teach them as much as we can at an early stage, especially in primary school. So if there was one big change I would introduce, that would be the one. But then at the workplace, it becomes a little bit, as I said, difficult, because people are defensive. Imagine now you're already an adult, and then someone comes in and said, I'm going to teach you how to listen. Not everyone is going to be very open to that.
Yeah.
But if there is a way to introduce that into training programs, and to say, okay, we're going to have 1 or 2 trainings this year. What are the topics that you're interested in? And to try to introduce these kind of topics so that people can choose, I think that would be an answer.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer. I do not see any new questions in the chat yet, so maybe let's give it a few minutes for the delay. Okay, maybe I will ask another questions to give the chance to people to ask another one, and then if there are no questions, we can move on to the second part of the presentation. Another questions that I have, I think you already partly touched this in your presentation, but it would be, why do you think soft skills are so important compared to hard skills, for example?
Yeah. So I think soft skills are really important because they're really the way, it's going to sound a little bit idealistic, but they really are our way of making sure that we can work together well, that we can work alongside each other, that we can create things together, and at the same time that we can have also job satisfaction and life satisfaction. Because if we are connected to others, if we manage to stay in that loop of connection through these skills of collaboration, of communication, this is what really will keep us going. And I think that especially in the last years, because many people have started working from home and we have been a bit disconnected. And we also notice this in the modern world, in the sense that, you may not be that connected to your neighbors anymore. You don't really, at least I remember when we were children, I kind of knew everybody in my building, but that doesn't really happen anymore. It depends, of course, but I think people are often quite disconnected. So I think people skills and soft skills, and teaching them and talking about them and discussing them are really our chance of making the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Thanks a lot. We have received a question in the chat, which is, are there any initiatives about certificates? So I think the question is, are there any certificate initiatives to actually certify the fact that people have soft skills?
Well, yes, there's a lot of initiatives at the private level. So there are, different courses, and on LinkedIn you have different badges that you can earn, and there's like a lot of from the private sector. And there's one that I'm actually going to show you that can sort of certify, but most of them are really based on your own self-evaluation. It's quite difficult to get others to certify and to recommend you, although you know already that on LinkedIn that can happen, but it's often on a mix with a mix of hard and soft skills. But as far as I know, there has been no official national or EU initiative to certify soft skills, and to create some kind of credentials or certification that would show. And I think, in a way, it's always going to be like that, because they're very elusive, as I say, and it's not easy to do that, because people change as well. And if someone says that you have the soft skill of communication, but then, for 5 years, and collaboration, but then for 5 or 6 years you work on your own, I'm not saying you would lose it, but you would need to kind of come back into the loop. So I think I personally would not go into direction of certifying them, but I would really focus on the usual tools that we have, which is references and people recommending each other, and to really try to read the soft skills in those words.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answer once again. I think since there are no new questions, we can now move on to the second part of the presentation. And of course, if new questions arise at a later stage, we will address them later on. So Masha, the floor is yours again.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about soft skills and employers. So here I just put a little image of kind of the basis of soft skills. I already said that usually, in most cases, the soft skills that employers look for are communication, teamwork, adaptability, problem solving, and creativity. Or at least this is what they will tell you, that this is what they look for. Of course, each sector has different needs. New soft skills that I have seen come up lately in this year, and that will obviously be important next year as well, are the one that I mentioned before: diversity and inclusion. Adapting to change. I see this in almost every job offer that I read, that they're talking about the adaptation to change. This is very important, because what we're looking at now, even before, also in my career, so it has been difficult to think of a job security of more than 5 years. But nowadays, it can be even shorter. So employers are looking for employees who are really adaptable to change, because what happens is that when they're not adapting to change in an organization, they will often look for another job very quickly, or they will not work effectively in the job that they have. So this is a key skill. They're kind of saying with this, the world is changing constantly. Your work is going to change. This may be your job description today, but tomorrow you need to be open that it is something else. So this is a soft skill that I see that is really being looked for lately. Remote working also doesn't sound like a skill in itself. I mean, now we all kind of know what it entails. But you have probably realized also that some people are better made for remote working than others. And I've noticed also that some people have actually been so demotivated by the fact that they don't like remote working, they're not good at remote working, that they also do not have maybe those digital literacy skills, or they do not enjoy this kind of world, and therefore they are missing out on a lot of opportunities, finding it very difficult to change work, to go back into the workplace with these kind of conditions. So for some people it's been great, for many people it's not been that great. So that soft skill is actually very much in demand as well. And the employers that know that they're going to be offering remote working, they better look for people who are really good at remote working and who like it, rather than people who really do not, right? We also have, there is a typo in my slide here, I will correct it later, sorry. The communication through video and images. So this is a soft skill that, again, it could also be thought of a hard skill, but actually because we do it also on a daily level with our mobiles, we need to have this as a soft skill. People are not only communicating now through words, through writing, but a lot through video and images. And I see a lot of the jobs are looking for that. And enthusiasm as well, because again, also with the situation that has happened, it's quite easy to be critical, it's quite easy to be a little bit down. So employers are looking for people who have enthusiasm. And again, you can say, well, someone is either enthusiastic by nature or they're not. However, it's something that also can be worked on to really find the positives, because there are positives. And it's true that when you recruit an enthusiastic person in your team, the whole atmosphere of the team changes. So I really understand that that's a skill that people want. Now, I just want to mention here for employers that there's this approach to interview that sometimes, of course, in bigger organizations, they have a lot of processes and they often work with consultants, and they have a very nice streamlined way of recruitment. So they know exactly what they're doing in that process. The processes are admittingly often very long and frustrating for the candidates, but of course, the wins at the end are quite big. So these big organizations that have these very high-level jobs, we understand that it's very their processes are very high level. But I would really invite all employers to look at their own recruitment process and to think of the traditional interview versus the competency or the skill-based interview. The traditional interview, you're going to often have random questions, very predictive questions. In these interviews, it's quite easy to be outsmarted by the candidate. It depends a lot on the employer, how they feel about the candidate. They're kind of assessing the candidate in a very superficial way. Maybe there's just like a good atmosphere, there's a nice conversation going on, and they just ride on that. They kind of analyze the candidate based on a general impression. And of course, these interviews are going to leave a lot of scope of error. So maybe you're going to have a nice rapport, but sometimes when you hire a candidate, just based on a general traditional interview, you might then later regret it, because you probably know that there's only a 50% chance that actually the candidate is going to be successful in the job. So in order for us to increase that 50%, it cannot be increased to 100, but at least maybe to 55, 60, we want to go and move towards the competency-based interview, where we really look at the skills that we're looking for, either hard skills or soft skills, and target each question for a particular skill. We want to give them situational-based questions. So, so either it could be, imagine you are in this situation, and then you need to kind of answer on what you would do in a situation, or based on your past situations and past experience, have you ever been in a situation where the team working failed? Have you ever been in a situation where your superior was disappointed with the work that you did? What you're doing is you're asking for very concrete situations. You are getting honest answers. Of course, not always, because up to a certain extent, these interviews can be prepared. But still, it's almost impossible to prepare each one of these situational questions. So I would really invite employers to look into and to create more competency-based interviews. Also, what is interesting is that you can have a very deep dive in order to check very specific traits that you need. And also, you can have a analysis later. You can kind of evaluate together with the others in your company. You can look at the client and you can look at these answers and be like, okay, so these are the you can brainstorm on what they have said. And these kind of interviews are really striving to render accurate results. Now, interestingly, whenever I went in for an interview as a job seeker, I've noticed that almost in 90% of the cases we're talking about a traditional interview and not very structured. And I think it's really a pity because it doesn't provide a chance for the candidate to really show who they are and shine. They are often more difficult. So in a way, as a job candidate, I'm relieved in a way because I'm not going to have to answer very difficult questions. But on the other hand, I think it's not a win-win situation for both the employer and the job candidate. So I would encourage to focus a lot on competency-based interviews for employers, but even in EURES, I know that you are sometimes pre-interviewing, and I know that you don't often go into competency, but maybe you can just prepare the candidates for that already. Also, that also actually happens before the job interview. You have the job description, and I've noticed that the job description, it should usually talk about the purpose of the job, who the job reports to, the location, the salary, the skill, and the competencies. But let's remember, we said that we live in such a changing world. We know that these job descriptions are actually changing already. The moment it's printed, it's probably already changed what someone in the company needs the job candidate to be doing, the new employee to be doing. So what is better is to also create a person specification which really puts highlights the personal qualities that the individual will need to perform the job in question. This is where we're going to put the soft skills that we want, and we really want the candidate then to show what are the essential elements that they have, the desirable factors, so that they can then we can, when we go to the selection process, then we can also make a very targeted interview on that. But I would just also invite employers not to be afraid of making a very clear person specification. It is true that in a way you may let's say, discard in a way someone from the beginning who may not be identified with that specification, because maybe they say, well, I'm not very, maybe they say, for example, well, I'm not very communicative because they're very introverted, for example. But that actually is not the case, because you can also be an introvert and be a communicative person. So it's really about for each candidate to see in an honest way, okay, this is what they're looking for. Is this really me? So for example, if they need someone who's going to be networking in a sales position, who's going to be networking a lot with people, is this really me? Do I really like networking? Am I a natural networker? These are the kind of things that we want the employers to specify so that the candidates can also not waste their time, right? Looking for proof of soft skills. So also for employers, we already mentioned that we can't easily find a way to have a credential to certify soft skills. You may have a candidate who says, look, I have a credential of soft skills, I went to the Leadership Institute, but will you be 100% sure that that will make them a leader? It's very difficult to know just because they have that course, that certification. So what I put here is, obviously I had to put my own reference here because I didn't want to put anyone else's, but I just copy pasted this from LinkedIn, and I looked at the first recommendation I was given in my career when I was a trainee in the European Commission a long, long time ago, 2008, and I met someone there who then decided to kindly write a recommendation. And so if I'm an employer and I'm looking to hire, myself, Masha, at this company, I'm looking at the soft skills and it's very interesting to look at something from the beginning of this person's career. It can be, of course, something very recent, but you also want to see, okay, this person now, this is what they're saying about them. What were they saying? What are the references, the recommendation 15 years ago? And then what you're doing is you're reading for soft skills, right? So here it says that this person made a proactive effort to meet new people. Okay, so you know now that this person is going to be out there, that they're going to be proactive in talking to people, that they gain insight into new topics. Okay, this person probably is interested in learning things, right? Even if they're not in their field of work. Okay, so that could be very useful for a specific company. The team spirit as well, very important. Participating in all the activities, encouraging others to do the same. If you have a company, that has a lot of kind of team spirit, a lot of group activities, okay, maybe you want that kind of person there. So this is what we do. We read for soft skills. Um, Also, I just wanted to show you here that at Google, for example, the kind of soft skills that they're looking for, algorithmic thinking. So that's a very specific soft skill that maybe you don't need, in any kind of job, but you do need if you're going to be working at Google. You need cognitive ability. Of course, when we look at it like that, we don't really know exactly what they mean, so we would need to have a look into their this is probably you can find online, a very detailed description of each of these skills. Teamwork, we know what it means, leadership. But I like the last two ones, clarity of vision. So they want someone who has a clarity of vision. That's interesting. How would you prove that, right? And they want someone who has humility. That's also a very interesting one. How would you prove that one? Oh, a soft skill. And how would you actually learn that one? So, what I think is interesting in soft skills is that there is such a wide variety. And sometimes, let's admit it, some organizations are inventing or saying that one of them is very important for them. What is really important then is to see whether they walk the talk, or is it just something that's on paper. And you can only, of course, know that by working in such an organization and seeing whether all these soft skills are really put to use or not. So I would encourage you also to ask your employers to, have a brainstorm session, and especially if they're having difficulty recruiting persons for a specific position, to really come up not only with a list of hard skills, but a list of soft skills that are specific to their company culture and that can actually be modeled by someone in the company. Because if you say, this is what we're looking for, but nobody in the company is showing these soft skills, then you have a problem, right? It seems that you're not walking the talk. For example, the EU competency of information management, which is digital and data literacy. So this is an example that, they really come up with, I'm sure, and that they can show very clearly that these are the people who have these skills with the ease that they deal with sharing the information and creating documents. It needs to be quite quick. You can also come up with a list of priorities of soft skills. So I'm guessing, I'm not sure, but at Google, this might be a prioritized list where, some soft skills are just more important than others. I also wanted to tell you some of my surprises with soft skills in my own career. So I found that working together was always said to be very important in almost all the organizations. But I've noticed that there has been a trend, especially lately, towards working alone. And that in a way, when people say, when organizations, when employers say that working together is very important, then they also need to make sure that there is teamwork, that they can show that there's teamwork, that there's already functioning teams in the organization. Because if not, it's just words, right? And we want to avoid that. Communication was definitely always of greatest importance. I have never had a job, and I'm sure you have neither, where communication was not important. But I've noticed that there's something else, which is adapting to company culture, adapting to people working there, which was even more crucial. So I would also advise employers to think hard about what their company culture is like. If their company culture is very relaxed, and very flat hierarchy, great, but make sure that the people who come to work in your organization know that, because even if they're great communicators but they don't like this kind of company culture, it's going to be difficult for them to be successful. Leadership was sometimes talked about as something important. But I found that it was only important if you actually led a team or if you worked on your own. If not, I don't think it was really used a lot, this skill. And let's admit, especially if you're working in small organization like I was, you didn't always have a possibility to lead a team. However, if you work on your own, I think you can definitely show some leadership skills. Learning was the most underutilized skill or underappreciated, and so was mentoring or teaching between colleagues. That was surprising to me, especially for those, oh, we need, we're open to learning or we offer learning opportunities, great learning opportunities at our organization. And then you would come there and, for months or years, you would learn things that were important for your job, but you wouldn't really feel like you learned something new. And I think this is a skill that employers, if they put it there, then they need to encourage learning, not only by having, fancy and expensive courses, but you can just have a learning opportunity between colleagues. You can set something up so that peers can teach each other skills. If you have an organization where people are mentoring each other, learning from each other, wow, I would say that is a great organization. And then creativity also, sometimes it was said that it was important, but it was not usually encouraged. I find that sometimes it's a skill that people are actually a little bit afraid of. So something also to think about. If an employer says they want a creative person, they better be ready for some ideas and some creativity that may, sometimes be a little bit over the top. Okay, so this was the second part. Let's see if there's some questions.
Yes, let's give it indeed a few minutes to think once again. Maybe while we wait to receive questions, I have one myself. So, yeah, my question would be: can employers be trained to take into account soft skills a bit more in their processes? Meaning, can they be, for example, advised on how to conduct competency-based interviews? How can it be discussed with them? The possibility to include soft skills requirements in job vacancies and so on. Are there any initiatives like this that you know of?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I don't know any initiatives, but definitely there are consultancies that are very good at introducing, let's say, change management and HR processes into organizations. So I think big organizations are, in a way, at an advantage here because they can make sure that their employees are aware of soft skills, that they work on their soft skills, and that when they hire people that they really look at their soft skills. With smaller organizations, of course, the budgets are less. So I think what is really important here is to use the people that are in the organization. And I can tell you, it has not been often that I've seen that someone has, for example, proposed in an organization to have a peer-to-peer learning program, or because in most cases people think that it's just going to be very burdensome, that someone will have to take a lot of time off their hands, which they do not have. But I believe that all of these things about soft skills, a lot of them are common sense. A lot of them have to do with our own experience. I have shared some of my experience. You also have yours. So I don't think you need to have an expert to come in and tell you that you need to be aware of soft skills. It's just about making sure that you talk about these things and that you have ways in your organization to have workshops with your employees where you maybe even put those employees that are very interested in HR, very interested in people skills, that are very good at people skills. I mean, there's always an organization, and I've seen it everywhere, where you have someone who's excellent at speaking on the phone, who has an excellent telephone manner. Why wouldn't they be giving a course on this, on telephone, how to be? I know that it sounds a little bit outdated now because we're using all these other, but for some professions it's still very important, huh? Like customer service. And sometimes a bad telephone manner can actually have, or email manner as well, right? Sometimes you can have people who are working very well, they have very good digital literacy skills, sharing information, all of that is fine, but then they're not very mindful of their emails, how they respond them, and even how they organize themselves. So that could be productivity as well. So there's just a lot of soft skills that we already have. This is like a treasure that we already have in your organization. You're rich with people who are rich with soft skills. Some are better than some skills than others. But that's the beauty of it. There's always someone who is just really good at something, and what you need is for that person to be able to share that with others. Now, not everybody is good at teaching, so I think that's a skill that is always good to bring someone from outside. So bring a trainer, someone who's specialized in learning, who can really then create a small program, who can talk about with the person who has this, a person who's a great networker, and say, okay, so tell me what is the knowledge that you have, and they discuss, and okay, we're going to have a 1 hour and a half workshop. We're going to talk about networking. You're going to give them some tips, then you're going to ask them after 1 week to follow up. And I think that when you do these things, it's just a win-win for everyone. You're going to create a good company culture. You're going to have the feeling, not only the feeling, but people will actually be learning things on the job. They're going to be much more motivated. And then when someone joins the company, they're going to be motivated to stay because they're going to see that it really is a culture of learning. So, yeah, I think this is the way to do it. Just use your own resources because they're there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for this very thorough answer. Since there are no new questions in the chat, I think we can move on to the third part of our training about soft skills and job seekers. Once again, if any of you have any questions related to soft skills and employers, there will be an opportunity to ask them also at the end of this webinar. So now I'll give the floor once again to Masha for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. Okay, so let's go now to our last part, which is about soft skills and job seekers. So, question I will ask here is, are we born with soft skills? So, for those of you who have thought a lot about psychology and also the kind of nature versus nurture debate, whether we are born with the way we are or whether it's our environment that shapes us, you all know that it's really, the answer is usually really a mix of the two. Some people have actually an easier inborn temperament in the sense that they're more easygoing. I have 3 brothers, and one of my brothers has a very easy inborn temperament, very easygoing, and even that is not a guarantee of great people skills, but I can tell you that things were quite nice for him in the workplace because he just has this easy way of dealing with people, not conflictive, but also not avoiding conflict, just kind of smooth sailing, knowing how to treat people, knowing how to communicate with others, and just making a lot of friends also in the process. So people with an easier inborn temperament probably are at a little bit of an advantage. Some people, however, are at a disadvantage, and this is now what we are realizing also with this idea of diversity and inclusion. So we know this topic, of course, has to do with a lot of different issues like race or sexual orientation, but we also have the fact that we sometimes forget that some people also have other issues that may make them diverse, like neurodiversity. So a person could have autism, a person could have, ADHD, which is attention deficit with or without hyperactivity. They can have varying intelligence levels. They can have even mental health issues like depression. These persons, very important to be able to integrate them into the workplace. Also, sometimes a person does not have an issue like with depression, but then suddenly they do, and you still want to continue working. So these are some things that we need to consider, that temporarily, or actually simply the way that they are, a person may not have certain soft skills exactly in the same way that another person does. The more we are aware of that, the better. Because if we do not know, so for example, with autism, there is a whole spectrum. So autism is not only a person who is nonverbal, but also you can have a person who is very competent in their work, very cognitively able, doing a very hard technical job, a tech job, I mean, so something with computers. But at the same time, maybe they're not very good at communicating and working with others. So these things really need to be taken into account. We actually develop soft skills in the same way we develop hard skills, with a lot of practice. So, you can say to learn how to drive, for example, for me, it was very difficult. It took me a lot of time, a lot of failed attempts, but finally I learned it. So with a lot of practice, it wasn't just the test, it was really the fact that I practiced a lot. When I had my own car, finally, that helped a lot, because in Belgium you can actually practice while you still don't have the test. So for me, that helped a lot. You need to be accompanied with someone, but that's how you learn. We develop these soft skills actually in the same way that we develop hard skills. So there is hope. We just need to, see that, okay, so I need to develop this soft skill that maybe I'm missing. It's, I don't know, for example, negotiation. Well, I need to put myself into situations where I'm going to have to negotiate things and develop that skill. Also, to say that learning and improving our soft skills, especially for those related to working with other people, it's very, very hard. It's not always easy to work with others, but it's just a great objective that can really bring a lot of good things to all of us. And this is, I mean, I have told you all of this because this is something I want job seekers to have, to take into account, really. So how should a job seeker approach then the interview situation, or actually just looking for a job? Well, they need to think, okay, which are really the soft skills that are relevant for my profession? Really to know that. They can look at that by talking to others, to looking at the job descriptions and just trying to, underline all the words that have to do with soft skills and saying, okay, this is the list of those soft skills that are relevant for my profession. Which soft skills come easy to me and which don't? That has to be a very honest way of looking at ourselves. Okay, this is really easy, but this is really, for example, I've noticed that many people selling is not a skill that they have or they want to have or they like. So that's something that's very important to be honest about, because if you don't like selling, if you're not this kind of hunter person, it's going to be difficult to be in certain selling professions. Not all of them, but certain. What I would recommend is that every person, apart from their CV, whenever you're looking for a job, and let's admit it, in a way, everybody is always in some way on the market, on the job market, is to really have also another document where they have a job history with those soft skills in mind. So I call this a script, and I didn't actually bring you an example of that. It's also very personal, so it's very difficult to share. It's something that's really for you, where you look at your life and all the experiences that you've had, and you really say, okay, which are the soft skills that I have shown in this situation, and really to focus on the positive, and also the negative situations where maybe there was a conflict with a coworker or with a superior or whatever, and to really say, okay, so this, that was a conflict. You can, maybe that you also did something wrong, but then also to think, okay, what were the things that I learned? What were the soft skills that I showed? Because maybe you didn't do something well, but then something else maybe you did do well. So to have that document always with you, to update it, to look at it, and especially before an interview, because you will maybe be asked, okay, tell us about a situation where team working failed. And when you know that, okay, in my 4 jobs, there were a situation in 2 of them where team working failed, and you remember very clearly what happened there, and you can explain that at the interview, and you can show the soft skills that you've had, you're going to be at a huge advantage, because you have actually put real effort into it, in the sense that you have prepared. And the people will know that you know yourself. And this is what soft skills is really about. You have to know yourself to also be able to then convince someone else to want to know you better, right? So for job seekers, some general tips is also, so as I said, think and know yourself, be honest with your own strengths and weaknesses. Also, be very creative as to finding stories or proof of your soft skills, and be ready to elaborate on these. Be ready to change and to improve certain soft skills, if that is what it takes to get a job or be promoted. This is really important. So this doesn't stop. If we start sleeping on our soft skills, then we're also not going to get anywhere in our career. If we want to get a different job or be promoted in our job, we want to be really set on improving our soft skills. And please, job seekers, just apply for jobs that are a good fit for both your hard skills and your soft skills. because in the end, this is really important. Even if sometimes you think you're missing some opportunities, it's not the best idea also to be disappointed then later in the job. The interviewing experience will also be much better and will not discourage you. You want to avoid bad interviews. And bad interviews are some of those where suddenly the interviewer realizes that you're actually not a good fit for the job. And you realize that they realized. So you want to avoid that. So try to apply only for jobs that are a good fit. I just wanted to show you here in my career how some soft skills were actually changing. Some of them were important in some positions, and in others it was other soft skills. In most of them it was communication, but at the beginning of my career I started to work as a personal assistant to a politician, and their time management was extremely important. Organization, multitasking, attention to detail, prioritizing, and of course communication. But I remember that was a very stressful environment. So if you're not good at, prioritizing and attention to detail, probably not a good person to be a personal assistant to someone. Then I was working on my own as an English teacher in different companies. So first with children and then in companies and in organizations, in ministries in Spain. Here it was very important to have the skills of planning, also leadership, because the students needed to really have a guiding you and to follow you. Cultural awareness, very important. Sometimes, you can say something that someone might be offended by, and communication. And then I worked a lot in Brussels, in different NGOs and organizations, where I had to show different skills. So in the private sector, I used to work for a short time in a big association in the private sector. There it was very private sector, so very stressed. So lots of resilience, lots of communication, learning new concepts, being quick to react, work together with others, being adaptable. The job, sometimes was changing from one day to another. And then in a small NGO, very different environment. It was much more calm, much more about relationship building, working together, being a self-starter, being proactive. So interesting how the soft skills change in different organizations where you work. So this is what I wanted to tell you about proving soft skills. So this is a website which is called EUROC. I don't know exactly if it's EUROC.com, but you can have a look on the internet. It is actually not for, let's say, it is made more for young people. So people who have not yet had a lot of job experiences. And this is a way that they can kind of certify or prove their soft skills. And what you do is you kind of fill out, like they ask you, have you ever, I don't know, led worked as a scouts leader, or so you kind of have to respond to different questions that are relevant for people who have not yet had a work experience, but who have, of course, many different skills. And then the program gives you a kind of diamond, which shows you, which are your strengths, which are your main soft skills, and in what kind of quantity. So I did this for myself just to show you. I'm not sure how popular this is by young people, how much it is used, but this is just an example of what can be done with a program that kind of shows soft skills. I think it's quite nice and useful for employers to look into that, especially for young people. And it could be also good to have that at later stages of people's career. But of course, it's a little bit tricky because you can just sometimes answer the questions the way you want. So I would still say that the old school tool of references, reference letters, recommendations on LinkedIn, which are really nice and easy to give, I would focus a lot on that to see and prove someone's soft skills. And also, of course, on talking to people who this person has worked with before, and the competency interview, which is a great way. For job seekers, there's this common mistake in interview, which is really that they will be asked about a situation where team working failed, and then they will start talking about how team working is very important, and for me, team working is something that I value a lot, and when you have a good team. So you see what I'm saying, what I'm doing. I'm talking in a very general way. So huge mistake for a job seeker in an interview is to talk in a general way. They have heard it many times. It could be you, it could be someone else. It's just not very personal. you always need to go to the specific and ideally answer with this STAR approach. So the STAR approach is when someone is exploring your past experience in an interview, they are that you respond by providing a situation, providing some context and background. So I was working in an organization, an international organization, as a internal consultant. There were 3 of us in the team. Our task, you have to describe then the task. We had to create a report. This was a report on the integration of school children from other countries into the Spanish education system. I'm giving you an example here. And then action, explain what, well, actually the challenge, and there was a challenge. The team working kind of failed. So we had a team leader who wasn't very present due to some health challenges. So it was really on us to make sure that this report was done. And then, you can say what the problem was, and then what did you do and how did you resolve the problem? Then what were the results? Of course, you don't always have to say that everything was perfect, because let's say everything is never perfect. But you can say, well, as a result, we at least continued and we managed to make this report, a result, we managed to make it through, we managed to create the report, it was finished. But then, of course, you can also say, what were the things that you learned, maybe what you would have done differently. So this is a beautiful way for an employer to really see who you are. And you're not perfect, but at least they see the way that you thought through things, how you dealt with the challenges, and what you learned from them. And just for the end, this is something that you will also get when you get the slide, is really some questions, also useful for the employer, but also for the job candidate to say, okay, so yeah, this is the kind of things that the employer actually wants to know. And it's a lot of details that they want. And we often, when we're in an interview, we don't want to give that many details. But please give as many details as you can without, of course, boring, making sure that people understand exactly the kind of assignment, the kind of stakeholders, because what they're looking for when they're listening, the employers, the people who are interviewing you, is they're looking for the similarities that may be to challenges that they have at their own organization, and to see how you would also deal with these. So there's absolutely nothing you can lose when dealing with this model. So this has been my last slide, and I hope that this was useful for you to think about soft skills, to see how important they are, and to really put yourself into the shoes of the employers, whether they're in a big organization or a small organization, and see how you can actually help the employers to put some soft skills into their recruitment processes, and also for job seekers to really make sure that they're aware that these soft skills are something that they need to prove themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Masha. So once again, if you have any questions related to this part of the presentation or the presentation as a whole, please feel free to post it in the chat. I have a question related to the last part of the presentation that you've just did. At some point, you mentioned quite a lot about how soft skills can be put forward and proven in interviews. But is there a specific way of highlighting soft skills also in the CVs? For example, would you advise that they are mentioned bluntly in the CVs, or more in a more soft way through work experiences, actually? Is there a specific place where you advise to put them in terms of graphic requirements? Would you even advise to include a chart, for example, like the one that you've shared in the presentation? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I wouldn't advise to include the chart, because you know that the CV is, of course, a document that is supposed to be short, very to the point, that needs to catch the eye, and that especially nowadays the keywords, language was always important in a CV, but nowadays you have this thing where the keywords can be looked very quickly, even sometimes not by a human, but by a computer. So the keywords are extremely important. And that's where the soft skills come in. So I would say that in the CV at the beginning, and this is a good point, I could have actually brought you an example of a CV. At the beginning, the soft skills should be included, not to exaggerate. I wouldn't put, more than like anything from 5 to 10, maybe even less. It really depends. To put ones that you can really prove, so that if they ask you, oh, okay, so you say that you're adaptable, to then really have specific examples where you showed adaptability. Ideally, for each of the skills, you would have 3 examples. But of course, if you just have one, that's fine as well. So I would put that in the CV just under the title, or just in that kind of introduction where you say a little bit who you are. You can also put them as keywords just under the introductory paragraph. But then also one way that you can litter a little bit the whole CV with soft skills is to put action words in your experience. So in moments where you have initiated something, collaborated with someone, invented something, decided something, led someone, all these action words are proof of soft skills, especially those that are very action oriented, like leadership and decisiveness and decision making and things like that. So keywords are very important, and those keywords are going to determine, they are going to give the impression that you actually do have the soft skills that you're saying you do have. But yeah, I would definitely encourage you to put them in, but be careful, just because you will be, and I think a good interviewer is going to look at a soft skill, especially at one that is very general. If someone says, teamwork, well, okay, they're going to say, tell me.
Prove it. Yeah.
Prove it. And if you cannot prove it, you're going to be in a very difficult situation.
Indeed. Okay, I still don't see any questions in the chat, so just to give a bit of time to our participants, I have another question related to your presentation. You did mention at some point that when you move on to different jobs, you obviously develop different soft skills, and it might be that you actually use a bit less some skills compared to the ones that you're currently using in your job. So is there anything that can be done to try to maintain soft skills that you were using in the past? I don't know, practice in a new job, habits that you can continue, or anything like that?
Yeah, that's something I didn't give a lot of thought to, but I wouldn't say that you would ever completely lose a soft skill. But it's true that if you're not using it a lot, it would be a little bit like, it would be kind of like a dusty book on a shelf, right? That you would.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend, and this is important always, is to always have activities in outside of, and I think this is just common sense recommendation, but very important, especially in today's world where, as I said, we're often disconnected, is to have activities outside of the workplace where you can practice soft skills. One example could be, if you like singing, you're singing in a choir. Or if you like cooking, you make some effort to, go and do some cooking classes with. But any activity that is with other people, and that ideally you do not have to discuss work, and also ideally where you do not have to discuss anything that has to do with politics or things like that, that is very a kind of stress-free environment where you can be who you are, and where it's only about that skill which is singing or cooking, so something that relaxes you, or any kind of sports. I've heard that sailing as well. But that really you can put the soft skills to use, because there you will need teamwork. There will be also problems. Nothing is ideal. So how will you negotiate those problems? For me, what comes to mind is when I was a trainee, I directed a theater play, and I think there's probably no better way to see your own soft skills, your own strengths and weaknesses as well, than in such a situation where you really have a deadline. You have to create a theater play together with others. You have to write it. Have to direct the actors, and this is just a wonderful opportunity for everyone to see what their soft skills are and to put them to use. So this is what I would encourage, to to, especially if you work alone and where
Mhm.
you are working often with your computer and you don't have opportunities to put those soft skills to use, you need to find another environment where there is a group environment where you will be collaborating with others. Yeah, I think it's really
Mhm.
important.
Okay, thanks a lot for the recommendations. Um, sorry, maybe as a concluding question then, a more general question about the entire presentation. What would you say is the most important thing about soft skills that people should keep in mind in terms of recruitment?
In terms of recruitment, from the side of the employer, or
In general, also for
Mhm,
employees when they apply, or yeah, for employers when they hire.
mhm. Well, I would say that the most important thing is to just make sure that we are always aware that without these soft skills, these are the skills that make us human. And
Mm-hmm.
without these skills, we are kind of like a little bit less human and less people. And so, what I would say is that each person should try to read any material. Ideally, it can be a book. I gave you one book recommendation, but there's so many other books. And I know that not everybody likes to read nonfiction, but I would really recommend reading or going on YouTube. And whenever you see, well, yeah, it's not just a recommendation, but I think what is important is just to know that we are not perfect, but that soft skills are very important for us. So what we want to do is to keep learning about them, keep reading about them, and just make sure that they are really a part of our working world, and also of our personal relations. Because the most important thing about soft skills is that these are the skills that connect us to others and that allow us to work with others. This is probably the most important thing. So if we can keep that in mind, then everything else will just come naturally. And when we prepare for an interview, we're going to be thinking about soft skills. When we create the interview, when we create a job description, when we think of our company culture, when we think of changing jobs, we're going to say, hey, okay, what about the soft skills? Which ones are they looking for? Which ones do I have? And then also, which ones should I improve on? So I think if we just keep that in mind, that without them, they're kind of like the glue
Mm-hmm.
that binds us together.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, since there are no more questions, I think we will end this webinar. So thank you very much, Masha, for this very
You're
interesting
welcome.
presentation and discussion. Thanks to all our participants who contributed in the chat, and who are, for those of you who are still watching us, I'm sending a message now in the chat. Um, Basically, if you have any further questions, you can send them to the email address that I'm mentioning in the chat right now. We would also like to inform you that the recording of this webinar will be made available on the YouTube channel earlier next week, and we will inform you by email when that is the case. So thank you everyone again for your participation, and we wish you a nice day. Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.
Bye.